All right, you're up, Crystal.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal Hurd, and I'm the programs coordinator here at the Charles Sumner School Museum and Archives. You all are making history tonight as we welcome you to our very first live virtual Hurlbut-Walker Memorial Research Forum. Named for Richard L. Hurlbut, the founding director of Sumner Museum, and James Dent Walker, the first professional archivist on staff here at the museum. We honor them, for without their leadership and efforts, we would not have had such a rich collection in archives devoted to the preservation of DC's public education history. Over the years, we've experienced phenomenal speakers and learned a lot about the legacy of DC's public education, and tonight will be no different. For those of you in the audience who are joining us for the very first time, I would like to briefly share some history about our space. Sumner School was completed in 1872 as one of the first public school buildings in Washington, D.C. to educate African-American children. The school was named for Senator Charles Sumner, who was a staunch abolitionist and civil rights activist. The building is an intentional tribute to Senator Sumner, designated in the nation's capital as a lasting reminder of his contribution to progress in American society. In fact, speaking with Ms. Burwell earlier, she described the Sumner School as visible historical evidence of the shoulders we stand on. In the 1970s, the building fell into disrepair and was scheduled to be demolished. Mr. Hurlbut led a successful effort to save the Sumner School. The official pioneering charter was realized in 1986, deliberately designating this space as the official museum and archives related to the history of DC's public education. We are proud of the legacy of this institution, and tonight's program is one aspect of how we share the history with the public. Before I turn the program over, I'd like to ask you to stay connected with us. If you are not on our mailing list, please visit our website and be officially added. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube using the handle @Sumner Museum. At this time, I'm delighted to introduce our very first virtual internship participant, Zoe Joyner. She's been integral in planning this event and including compiling the beautiful slideshow that many of you have been watching upon entering this space tonight. Zoe, please introduce yourself and quickly share the house rules for this evening's event.
Hi, my name is Zoe Joyner, and I'm a rising junior from Spelman, at Spelman College from Northern Virginia. This summer, I've had the pleasure to work on very exciting projects, and I'm really excited for this discussion tonight. Before we get into the house rules, I wanted to do a quick icebreaker. Please use the chat button located at the bottom of your screen to indicate where you're tuning in from. And also, you can type in yes if you had the opportunity to watch Kindred Spirits before the discussion tonight. Well, it looks like we have a lot of people from the DC metro area as well as South Carolina, and it looks like a lot of you have had the opportunity to see this film before. So please continue to use this feature to share your questions, comments, and I believe there's a thumbs up feature to show that you agree with someone's statement. I just wanted to let you know that this discussion is being recorded and we'll be sharing it on our YouTube channel as well as our other virtual platforms. Um, I would like to introduce you to Miss Kimberly Springle, who is the director of the Sumner Museum and who will be introducing our guest as our guest of honor, as well as moderating the discussion.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you, Crystal, as well. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our very first virtual program. We are honored to present this evening, Kindred Spirits, a discussion with filmmaker Cintia Cabib and artist Liian Thomas Burwell. This will be the first time that we have had a Hurlbut-Walker forum where we have individuals tuning in from all across the country. I think I saw Delaware and St. Louis and of course the metro area, and South Carolina is represented as well. So I'm super excited about that. I do not have the proper words to articulate just how excited I am to present this program this evening. You all are fortunate to experience history in the making as we dialogue about the newly released film, Kindred Spirits. We are pleased to have with us this evening in discussion the film producer, Cintia Cabib, and Liian Burwell, who was one of the subjects of the film. We are honored to have in spirit the late Hilda Wilkinson Brown. So I want to share a little bit. I noticed also in the comment section that many of you have had the opportunity to view the film and others have not. And later we will talk about what is to come in the future as far as viewing the film. But I want to give a little background about the film Kindred Spirits. It chronicles the lives and artistic careers and accomplishments of an aunt and niece duo, Hilda Wilkinson Brown and Liian Thomas Burwell. This film provides a rare glimpse into the lives of two African-American women who were successful artists and educators during a period of racial segregation and the Great Depression. Most notably, and what I really appreciate about the film is that it tells the story of the unique relationship and bond between Hilda and Lilian. We are honored this evening to learn more about the film, the process, and the people associated with the production. At this time, I would like to give some biographical details and introduce our guest of honor before we commence into a lively, dynamic discussion with our honored guest. And I will start with Cintia Cabib. Cintia is a brilliant filmmaker and is the producer of the film Kindred Spirits. She is an independent producer, videographer, and editor. Her documentaries have aired on public television nationwide and also in various venues across the US. Her films have also been purchased by educational institutions, libraries, museums, organizations, businesses, and individuals. Cintia's films include a film called Labyrinth Journeys, which presents the stories of individuals who use labyrinths as tools for healing and meditation and rehabilitation. Another film she created is called A Community of Gardeners, which explores the vital role of 7 urban community gardens. And another film she created, in addition to Kindred Spirits, tells the story of an 88-year-old carousel, and it's called Carousel of Memories. Our other featured guest of honor is none other than Liian Thomas Burwell. Liian Thomas Burwell was born in 1927 here in Washington, D.C. She was educated at the High School of Music in New York and then moved to Washington, D.C., where she graduated from Dunbar High School. She attended Pratt Institute and D.C. Teachers College before obtaining her Master of Fine Arts at Catholic University. She did her practice teaching at Pratt prior to becoming a master teacher right here in the D.C. public school system, and she joined the visual arts faculty at Duke Ellington School of the Arts. She has broad experience as curator, director, and activist in the arts. During our pre-production meeting, in fact, we also learned that she was a curatorial director here at the Sumner Museum. So we were excited to connection as well. In 1997, Hampton University Museum in Virginia published her book, From Painting to Painting as Sculpture, The Journey of Lilian Thomas Burwell, in conjunction with her 30-year retrospective exhibition that was held at that prestigious historic museum. Her work is an expression and a reflection of the history of her own reactions and experiences. Her work has changed dramatically throughout her career, which we will discuss a little bit this evening, and still reaching beyond herself, she often introduces clear acrylic to project the works beyond themselves, further toward the realm of spirit. Spirit is another theme that we will talk about in-depthly in this conversation. And speaking of spirit, I would like to share some biographical details about Hilda Wilkinson Brown, who was the other feature in Kindred Spirits. Hilda Wilkinson Brown was born in 1895. She was an artist and a teacher from right here in Washington, D.C. Brown was involved in art education, developing curriculum that challenged the typical mimetic approach of teaching in favor of a more individual creative process. The focus of Brown's life was her career as an educator, but she was a prolific artist in her own right. She made illustrations for African-American publications such as the Brownies book and Crisis magazine. She was also a highly skilled painter and printmaker. Her prints are included in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and also the Art Institute of Chicago. After graduating from Cooper Union in 1923, Brown started teaching right here in Washington, D.C. at Minor Normal School, where she also attended. While she was there, she coordinated a 2-year art history, design, and fine arts curriculum, and eventually chaired the department. In 1929, she integrated fine art and industrial arts into the school's teacher training program. From 1932 until her retirement in 1961, Brown created set and costume designs for the school's theater productions. She developed graphics for the school and even designed the school seal. She was an assistant professor at the time of her retirement. It's also important to note that though Brown was heavily invested and affiliated with Minor Normal School, she was also very active in working with the public schools in DC. She introduced the modern approach to art education in 1933 within the curriculum. She also lectured at Howard University and other schools throughout Washington, DC on African art heritage, art interior design, and art education for elementary school teachers. That's a little bit about Hilda as well. And I would like for you all, wherever you're located, and I know we can't hear you, but give a round of applause for our featured guest. And we're gonna jump right into the discussion with Cintia. I'd like to welcome Cintia and Lilian. Thank you for joining us this evening for what will surely be a wonderful discussion. I cannot wait for us to talk and dialogue. And I wanna begin the conversation by speaking to you, Cintia, about your artistic journey as a filmmaker and elements that led you to creating Kindred Spirits. So first, I would like for you to share with us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and how your foundation shaped you as a filmmaker.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. It's great to be here. I was born in Argentina. I came to the United States with my family when I was 6 years old. In college, I majored in international relations, and then I received my master's degree in Latin American studies. And then something happened. I don't know. I think I was watching a documentary one night and I thought, this would really be interesting to produce documentaries. And so I wound up taking classes at a local community television station, learning all the elements of production and learning how to use the equipment as well. And I wound up actually teaching there and heading the education department at this community television station for almost 20 years. But in the meantime, I produced my own independent programs. It wasn't enough for me to just work there full time. I really felt this passion to produce programs about people, places, local history, all in the Washington, D.C. area. And so I've been doing that for a little bit over 30 years now. In terms of Kindred Spirits, I came up with the idea to produce the film when I was presenting 2 other documentaries at a conference that was hosted by the Historical Society of Washington, D.C. There were several tables set up where various local historical associations had brochures. I picked up one of the brochures, and on the brochure, I saw this beautiful painting, modernist painting of a street scene in Washington, D.C., and I was really struck by it. I looked to see who the artist was, Hilda Wilkinson Brown. I hadn't heard of her. I did a little bit of research, and I found her niece, Lilian. And so I got in touch with Lilian, and I told her I had seen this painting, and I was interested in knowing a little bit more about Hilda. Little did I know that Lilian was the person who knows everything about Hilda and her life and her work, and that they had developed a really, really strong bond. And Lilian herself, just like her Aunt Hilda, had become an educator and an amazing artist. And so what started off being an initial idea to maybe produce a documentary about Hilda Wilkinson Brown turned out to be a film about Hilda, Lilian, their special relationship. And in order to really tell this story, I felt that I had to delve into the historical times during which they lived, because that's a really important part of their story. And so for those of you who have seen the film, you have seen that we talk about the segregated schools in Washington, D.C., the venues which African Americans created to exhibit and publish their work, the challenges, the difficulties they faced because they were discriminated against, the LaDroit Park historic neighborhood in Washington, D.C., which was an inspiration for so many of Hilda's paintings, where she lived most of her life. And so I weaved that into the documentary.
Thank you for that. We will have an opportunity to learn more about the relationship with you and Lilian and how you met, well, how you came to work on the film together. But I do want to ask you some questions about the process. You talked a lot about including contextual historical information, which is important to lay the context of what you're speaking in the time period. Can you share about the process? So like, how long did it take to make the film? What elements were involved as far as research? And really, the last piece is we're dealing with 2 incredibly rich individuals with rich narratives. So I'd like to know a little bit about the editing process as well, and how did you condense these 2 enormous individuals into 26-minute film product?
Right. I was really lucky in the sense that for my initial research, Lilian shared with me 2 articles which she had written, one in Washington History magazine, a beautiful article about her Aunt Hilda, and she also had another article about not only her aunt, but also Lilian growing up with her parents and being born during the Great Depression. So those were my initial 2 references that I used just to become familiarized with Hilda and with Lilian. And so Lilian herself was a great source of information. We actually sat down for several interviews, which lasted several hours each. And then in the meantime, I also did a lot of research. I read about W.E.B. Du Bois and the Crisis magazine, which he started, as well as the Brownies book, which was the magazine for young African-American children. I did a lot of research on LaDroit Park. I learned about the Barnett Aiden Gallery. and did a lot of research on that. So I read a lot. Some of these materials are available online, others, through the library books, reference books, going to visit archival collections, university collections, etc. So there was a lot of information that I gathered. And I also did that through, interviews that I did with other people. The initial spark for the documentary took place in 2014. However, I did not begin filming until 2017 for various reasons. Lilian, she really wanted to be able to prepare the material for me, and she was curating a lot of shows, etc. So this took some time to get started, and it ran for about 3 years. Now, what you have to understand is that for documentary filmmakers, one of the big issues that we face is finding funding for our films. And so that's a process which takes a while. I did put in a lot of my own time, but I also received grant funding to help with the production. So that took a while. The production, I tend to do just about everything myself, but I want to give a big shout out and recognize John Wetmore, who was the cameraman and sound person for the documentary. He's a colleague of mine, and we've worked together on several films. And so he shot and did the sound for all the interviews and a lot of the, what we call B-roll, which is all the visuals for the film. And let's see, so I did a lot of research. I found people also through recommendations of who to interview. A lot of, again, thanking Lilian, she has so many photos, family photos, that she was able to provide me for the film, very important. And also a lot of the artwork, I relied on Lilian for that. And then there are about approximately 30 individuals and institutions that then I found additional archival material. Some of it is what we call in the public domain, which I can use without receiving permission. Others have to go to each source and receive permission and licensing rights to use them. And another big part is writing a script. And as a producer, I do a lot more research. As you said, it's a little bit over 26-minute film because I needed to do it for public television broadcast length. But initially, I do a lot more research and gather materials than what I eventually wind up using. And obviously that's what happens also with the interviews that I do with people. I transcribe all of them and then I create the story from what they say. And the editing portion, which you asked about, is one of the most exciting parts, but it's also one of the most challenging parts, because I have to decide how I'm going to tell the story and how I'm going to illustrate it and how I'm going to combine the interviews with the visual elements. Mm-hmm. And I also spend a lot of time listening to music. Sometimes it's easier to have a music composer for these types of documentaries. In this case, I went with music libraries, so I spent hours and hours listening to music and finding the right music to create that mood, and then editing the piece together. And so a lot of these things just take a lot of time. For example, the illustrations that Hilda did for the Brownies book, luckily the Library of Congress has the entire Brownies book collection digitized, but I had to go through each book and find the illustrations which Hilda had created, and then save them on my computer, etc., and then decide which ones I was going to use. So there's a lot of that, fixing archival photos in Photoshop. There's a lot of that also because photos are not in the best condition a lot of times, and you have to really work with them. So there's a lot of elements. I could probably talk for another 2 hours about it, but that's the basic gist.
It's very artistic. I wanted to ask you that technical question about process because, you know, as we talked to Lilian, being a visual artist, you too, Cintia, are an artist as you put this composition of a film together. So what resonated is that you noted that you listen to music, you know, that that's another element of process that I would not have considered. So I want to ask this question, and this will also segue into Lilian. Lilian, I would like for you to address this as well, is what do you want viewers to take away from the film, Kindred Spirits? What was in creating it, Cintia, and developing all of these aspects and putting it together like the artist you are, what do you hope people get from Kindred Spirits after viewing it? And the same for you, Lilian, after Cintia answers, I'd love to hear from you about your involvement in the film and what you hope viewers gain after experiencing the film.
For me, it was really a discovery to discover Hilda's artwork and Lilian's artwork, this amazing artwork. And so one of the things which I want to have viewers experience is the thrill of viewers also discovering this artwork, many of them for the first time. So that's one of the things that I want people to take away from the film. Secondly, I want them to understand the history, the circumstances that these artists face growing up in a segregated society, the opportunities that white people had, which they did not have, how they came together as a community, as colleagues, as artists, to accomplish so many things and to share in those accomplishments. And I also would like people to be inspired after watching the film to see how both artists pursued careers as educators despite having all these challenges that they faced in the society in which they lived, and such accomplished artists. For any of those of you who teach, you probably know how difficult it is to teach and to pursue your art or your passion at the same time. And both of these women did that, and they created amazing works of art while doing that. And their contributions in the field of education are so important, and it's important to recognize that as well as the art that they created. So I hope that people also come away with a feeling inspired after watching the film.
Thank you.
Can I throw my 2 cents in here without being asked?
Yes.
I think that Cintia has left out the most important thing accomplished in this entire situation. The fact that we are only the very, very tip of the iceberg. The fact that she opened up whatever it was that we had to offer in a much, much larger reality that has been ignored and overlooked. The fact that we are no more than the shoulders upon whom we stand. Hilda and I are just one little pair of shoulders. Believe you me, you have no idea what is underground that hasn't been touched yet. And Cintia has taken two humble people, hopefully humble enough, but artists never are really fully humble, and put us in context as an example of what they've missed, of the sunshine that's in every bit of rain that has been overlooked for decades and decades and decades. And the times that we live in now in this country and the politics that we're subject to need even more to realize that they don't know 1/10 of what is there behind us. And Cintia has brought that out, and she's been more of a historian than anything else to put us where we belong as a group, to know that we're nothing but the shoulders, the result of the shoulders that stood behind us that have been ignored. That's where the real talent is. That's where the genius is in Cintia and what she's done. She's really a historian.
Thank you for saying that, Lilian. You're absolutely correct. And I'm gonna switch it up a little bit because you stated that about your commitment as well to preserving Hilda's legacy and making space for others, because I didn't share this with you when we spoke previously, Lilian, but I first learned about you from someone else that you contributed to. She may be on the call, Pam Lofton-Harris, a former student of yours, and others. I heard about you as far as what you contributed to them as far as helping mold them into artists. So I definitely want to talk about that whole circle. And you used it very well, this terminology of conduit and about people getting the stories out or putting forth energy in another person, you know, of the next generation to support them. So that is also much of what the documentary is about, is how Hilda did that for you. And I see, even when we posted this event, people wrote on Instagram that you were a mentor to them. And I'm sure there are people that are listening in where that is the case. So I think that's very important. We are grateful to Cintia for her genius in producing this film and illuminating your story and Hilda's story. And as you mentioned, hopefully this will inspire others to dig deeper and pull other stories, because as you mentioned, this truly is just the tip of the iceberg as far as sharing this story about you two. But I want to delve into questions about some of your influences. When did you first know that you wanted to become an artist?
I think it was in my blood. I don't know if I ever made a decision. It was the last thing on earth that my parents thought made any sense when I said I wanted to be an artist. They said, not an African-American woman at this day and age, you know, you won't even be able to eat. And of course, that's where Hilda came in, because she convinced them that if I studied to teach art, the students would be the patrons that fed me, and it would give me the freedom. And of course, having that freedom is what made me learn to fly. I never thought of competing. I never thought of anything except get it out of me, anything that I thought was of importance, anything that I witnessed, that I reacted to. It was hardly ever conscious at all that I had I never thought I was an artist. I thought I was one of many.
Wonderful. I was very impressed when I saw your yearbook photograph, and within the caption, you indicated that you were going to become an artist, an art educator. So you knew.
I did?
You said that. Yes, you did. And another thing that you said, all of the seniors in this Dunbar High School yearbook were asked to, I guess, provide a word that that I guess resonated with you or said something about you. And your word was versatile. And I thought that was very interesting as I have been learning about your journey. And I wanted you to share with us a little bit about the notion of versatility, that word versatile that you put in your senior class yearbook at Dunbar many years ago, and how versatility has resonated throughout your life and career as an artist.
I think that using the word versatility doesn't ring the same bell of reality to me as that of being a rebel. Is that what a rebel is? Someone who's versatile? It was my father who forced me to think and not accept something because it existed or because someone else said so. I think I always was a runny mouth. I talked a lot. If I was quiet too long, my father would say, "What you thinking, girl?" And if I told him what I was thinking, he'd say, "What makes you think that?" Now, this is a man who grew up the son of a former slave with 20-some brothers and sisters, and yet he was the intellect in the family because he forced me to think. I never accepted what anyone said as fact. I got in trouble in school by asking why when a fact was given to me. If he would say, if I said that I found this out in a book, he said, "Who wrote the book? What makes you think he knows what he's talking about?" And if I found that on the cover and it wasn't enough, he would say, "Well, why do you need to believe it? Why does it make sense to you?" He forced me to think. And I think that by forcing the rebel in me, what people would call the rebel, was really the creative spirit that he put height on. I think that's where the art came in. But I would not have identified it as that. I identify it as an individualism that I think every single living person owns. If we don't do anything but clean a cut that's in our hand, it will heal itself. We are born to be creators. Our bodies, if we stand on one leg long enough, the other one, the body ordinarily stretches to compensate so we don't fall down. We're all artists. And of course, my mission in life has been to convince you, every single one of you, of what you are and what your possibility is and your potential is that you don't know. That's the teacher in me. And my work is almost in the back as it was created, because it's only when something in you meets something in me that I didn't even know I was putting down there. That's when I say I've done something. That's the art, is that communication is when I pass it on. And I don't know that I ever have stopped being a teacher preacher who believes that anything I have of worth is a gift that needs to be given back again if something else is not going to be given to me. So it's a process. That's what art is. And I think that normally when you ask me, when did I want to be an artist? I think there's a category that's usually thought about that. And I never thought that way. I still to this day don't think of I'm an artist any more than anybody else. I just think they haven't discovered who they are.
Wow, that's awesome. I want to talk to you about that role. So the former role of educator. So we all know that to be, you're educating us right now in this interview and in this discussion. But you did have a formal position as an educator at Wilkinson School of the Arts. So that came about in 1975 to 1980 or so. And I'd like to know, in what ways did that teacher role impact you and impact your work as an artist?
How it impacted my work? I don't know that I ever thought about my work. I thought about making that communication. My work was my students. As a matter of fact, that became a handicap in a way, because I even retired early because I was running on 2 tracks, producing art and finding art, convincing everybody what their potentials were. And I ran into trouble. I'd go to school half asleep sometimes because I'm up the half night sleeping. But I don't know that I ever separated it or ever do, because I know the potential that's in people. I've seen people that could hardly walk end up dancing after I convinced them of who they were. And that's my art. That's my art as much as what I put on a piece of paper. And even on the piece of paper, when something in me is recognized as something in you, then I've made a connection. And then I feel I'm somebody. That's when I really feel I've accomplished something. And that's when I feel that's the art. You know, I was born as nothing but a piece of helpless protoplasm. And everything that I've gained and everything that was given to me, as long as I empty it out to others, there's space for more. And you don't think I get a high off of that? I continue to be able to pass it on and get more, even without asking. It even gets me in trouble because I overdo what my body is able to do here at age 30. What am I, 23? Yeah. Oof.
That's right.
And I'm still frustrated if I can't be producing something or convince, if I can't do anything but run my mouth and convince you how wonderful you are and what your potential is, then I feel I'm somebody.
That's wonderful.
Then I feel I'm somebody.
Absolutely wonderful. So this whole creative piece of where you have this communication piece where you want to instill in others, and then also just constantly create. Can you share a little bit, because I know that your works that you create have evolved over time. So within the film, you mentioned that your aunt Hilda loved the earth, and that you like gardening, and that you enjoy seeing the unfolding of nature, and that shows up in your work. Can you share how your close connection to your aunt Hilda, as well as your own personal interest, show up in your work? or have shown up in your work over time?
Well, I didn't even know of her connection with nature, with flowers, so much as it was simply part of her, because she used to spend the summers at Oak Bluffs, and I would watch her with gardening. If it affected me, it was not consciously,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, you can't help but try to be like the people that you admire. And I don't know that any part of her or any part of what she did got past me on a conscious level. I have no doubt that unconsciously it affected me, but I can't really answer your question because I don't remember. I just wanted to be what she wanted me to be. And she believed I could be anything. She thought I was the artist in the family instead of her. I never got that.
Wow.
I spent on more time at it than she did, at producing work. But it's strange. I just never thought of those things as I look back and I realize that there's no way that I could be or do what I am if it hadn't been for the way she was. So she wasn't forcing it on me or verbally convincing me of anything. It was her example. And she was my idol. She was my idol.
So I want to bring you and Cynthia back, together and have a dialogue. I have questions for both of you. But before we get to that part, I'm so glad you shared what you did about Hilda, about how she instilled in you and how much you admired her and how much she influenced you. And in 1983, you had the opportunity to curate a retrospective exhibition of her work. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? And the other question is, do you feel you have honored your Aunt Hilda's legacy? And I have another question, is how do you believe she wants to be remembered and represented for years to come?
I want everything that she did to be enjoyed. I want everything that I did that I thought had value enjoyed. I think everything that you do that has value. We go through all this racial stuff that's going on now. And the basic thing is that we do not realize that the differences that there are in each other or why we need each other. We're all parts of a chain. And if one is not honored and kept together and kept straight, then the whole chain breaks. And nobody is everything. And the differences in our culture and our thinking are why we need each other, because nobody is everything. It's impossible. So I don't know that you would classify this as being an art, but this is the art as far as I'm concerned. And when you reach in and find what it is that's true of you, and don't even compare yourself to other people, that isn't even important. You just have something, you develop something that becomes a contribution. And the selfish part of it is that by giving it out, you've got space to get more given into you. And I can't say that I don't want more always. My mantra now is living for possibility. I want to know what next? What next?
I like that, living for possibility. I'd like to.
I'm not answering your questions very.
No, this is perfect. It's perfect what you're saying. It's just so profound and beyond like the surface of a question. Your commitment.
Can I throw one more thing in that may be a partial answer to what you're saying?
Yes.
What I thought my art was, or how I made it, something like that you asked me. My short-term memory's going to pot. I don't remember exactly what you asked me. So I'm using the fact that I've got a stage here, and I'm a preacher as much as
it's okay. Share it how it comes out. Share what comes to mind.
Yeah. About when I just said I was an artist, or when I became an artist, you asked me something like that.
Yes. When did you know that you wanted?
I do remember visiting an exhibit here in Washington. That was a part of a storefront something where there's parts of the exhibit pieces were in the window that you could see as you walked by on the sidewalk. And they were all very young people that were just a little bit younger than me. All of the pieces were very dark and somber and reactive to what was going on in the world, even whether it was representative or not representative. There was an inference of something that sounded very unhappy. And that was not life. And I remember making a conscious decision to show the other side of reality, that there was sunshine behind each cloud, that there was no such thing as a shade unless the sun was shining. I very definitely remember making that was going to be my purpose, is to show the other side of reality, to show that in every dirty rain puddle, it could reflect the blue sky. And if you could say that, that's when I decided I was an artist. That's when I felt a real mission come upon me. And I think my work began to change then. And that's when the flowers and the plants came into my work. And the fact that I was studying under Ben Abramowitz, who taught me to stop trying to make it look like something that a camera could do. I was always failing at that. And he opened up a whole Alice's Wonderland for me, and making me go into something, because that's when spirit began to dominate. And I just was an instrument of putting something down. And there again, I began to think I was something. And yeah, if that's the time I said I was an artist, yes, I guess I was.
Awesome, that's beautiful, thank you. I would like to bring Cintia into the conversation, and I want to talk about the film. So when Cintia reached out to you, Lilian, about the film, how did you feel? What did you think about that? And can you both share what it was like to work together on the film, and what were some of the high moments? What are some of the, the best things that have come out of this so far?
As Cintia could tell you, I was very slow at giving her any kind of response because I was too busy doing other stuff I wanted to do. But I felt that this was an opportunity. When Aunt Hilda passed, or just before she passed, she made me her executor. And all of her will, she did not mention a word about any of her art. So I automatically became, what do you call the person who's in charge of your art stuff? I can't remember the word right now. I was a representative without her knowing. So that was my self-appointed job. I said, here was this golden chest full of golden jewels that she thought I was the artist in the family because I was more prolific. I couldn't see how she could even compare me with what she was doing, because my stuff looked very awful next to hers in my own sight. But she believed in me, and I believed in her, so she must have had some truth in that. So she gave me that kind of courage to think I was somebody. And then I eventually became much more of a person than I ever would have been otherwise. There's a psychological thing important of that. But because she never even mentioned her art in her will, she never even mentioned it. I found one of her most beautiful pieces on the floor under a furnace in a house that I lived in, that she had lived in LaDroit Park. She never even mentioned it. The only thing she said when I asked her verbally, well, what about your art? Because we were discussing her will. She said, well, if anybody in the family wants it, let them have it. And that was it. So that exhibit at at Howard, was to give importance to what she did not consider that important. I had to make up for what she hadn't done for her. I was on a mission, and I always have been, to show her work and to get it enjoyed. It wasn't about selling and making money or making a living. It was about sharing something. She was this wonderful woman with this magnificent talent and brain and mind, and a giver, and nobody knew about her. You were going to put her in her grave and just let her sit there and rot? No. Anything I could do to bring it out, fine. And she was a shoulder. She was the main shoulders that I stood on in terms of that whole area of thought. I owe her.
So how did you feel in the 21st century when Cintia approached you about having seen her beautiful art on a postcard, I believe it was, Cintia, at the, yes. So when she wanted to know who Hilda was and wanted to create this film, how did that make you feel?
I went outdoors. I live in Highland Beach now. It was early one morning, And I yelled at the top of my voice, if anyone was passing on the street, I just said, "Hallelujah!" And no one could have guessed what Cynthia did. She simply used a couple of facts, Hilda and me, to make a much larger statement that was so important and so urgent. And to be part of that, to be a means to something great happening that Cynthia's genius accomplished. She put it in a historical context. Nobody told her that stuff. She told you. She researched, she struggled, she dug it out of me when I didn't even know it was there. So, you know, it was triumph. It was triumph to me, but it was mostly the opportunity, as I said, to show the tip of the iceberg. It was the beginning of something. She opened up something that had been shut too long.
Yes. Cynthia, do you want to share a little bit about what it was like encountering Lilian and the process, and what were some of the high moments with putting the film together? So we're talking about before the film is complete. What were some of the high
Excuse me, I need to throw this in. I also gave her a hard time. That's all I got to say.
Oh, okay.
That time. She doesn't know anything about art. How does she know how to pick out what? I couldn't. Talk about ashamed. I'm so ashamed. I'm ever doubting her, you know. She'll tell you about that. She's right, she wouldn't.
Cynthia, do you want to share?
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
That's okay. Well, first of all, I was just thrilled after, you know, all I had seen was that one painting on the brochure. So when Lilian shared with me the other work that Hilda had done, I was just so impressed. I thought, oh my God, you know, you have to do a documentary on this artist, and then to see Lilian's work too, and then to find out about their relationship. And I have to say that I think it's really important, as I mentioned before, that Lilian is the person who can talk about Hilda and her life. She's the most knowledgeable person, and of course about the relationship. So I had to take advantage of that. I mean, I think it's a really important story to get out there, and I see it as my job as a documentary filmmaker to do this type of work.
You wrote a history book. You wrote a history book.
Yeah.
And that's another part that I love. In many of the films that I've produced, I've incorporated history in them. So for example, you mentioned that I did a documentary on a carousel. That was from 1921. Well, that carousel turned out to be a very important symbol during the Civil Rights Movement, because it was located in an amusement park in Maryland, which did not allow African Americans to enter. And so there were civil rights protests, and the protesters got on that carousel and they were promptly arrested and charged with trespassing. And so the people who ride the carousel don't know, many of them, about that history, but I love to bring that type of history in. I think it's important for people to know about that. And so that's one of also the aspects of producing this film that I really enjoyed. It's a challenge, it's not easy. I have to condense a lot of things. I mean, people, you know, there's a person who has written a dissertation about the Barnett Aiden Gallery. I mean, you could probably do an entire documentary about it. But I was really happy to be able to have the opportunity to talk to Lilian and to get that story, and also to talk to you, Kimberly, and the late David Driscoll,
Yes.
who also knew both Lilian and Hilda, and was very involved with the Barnett Aiden Gallery. And so it's a story that really needed to be told.
One of your audience just put a little comment up there on the bottom of the screen. saying is you couldn't have art without history or history without art. It was a very interesting thing because here in Annapolis, we had, the Highland Beach is part of Annapolis where I live. There was a whole to-do that had to do with the more traditional strengths of politics in Annapolis, tearing down some of the artistic stuff. I won't go into the details, but we put up our whole mantra for the objection to what was happening, without me going into all detail, was that today art is tomorrow's history. If you don't, just because we didn't fit into a tradition, did not mean that we didn't belong there, didn't need to be seen. And that's what Cynthia is saying in another way, although this person that just entered that little comment about art being history, history is art. They are the same thing. It's the evidence. That's the archivists who are digging in the ground, they're the ones that discover what the real history of the times were, based on what people were leaving and what people had done, the things they worked with. And it's much truer than we really admit. Much of our problems, 3/4 of it, is simply the lack of education. People don't know. And that's why I have such admiration for what was accomplished in this show. Of course, I don't mind being a subject, you know.
Awesome. Well, there are some wonderful questions we're going to address from our wonderful audience. So I have one final question for both of you. And really, Spirit, Kindred Spirits is the name of the film. Lilian, you talk a lot about spirit in your work and leaving spirit within work. And the question I want to ask for both of you as artists and creators, what is the spirit that you both wish to leave behind in your created works?
Who do you want to answer? You know, I will. Go on, your turn, dear.
No, you go ahead. I'm going to think about it.
Okay.
I don't believe that anything comes through me. Anything comes from me. I think it comes through me. And this behaves in a very virtual way. I can put down, I have to tell you this quick little story. I had been turning my nose up at the abstract expressionists. I'd been doing different kinds of art that had to do with, I don't know what you call it, magazine illustrations and stuff like that. And a friend of mine suggested that I needed to get back into my art. That's making my own original stuff. And he told me about Abramowitz, who was there at the Jewish Community Center then. And we had been stretching canvases and taking the empty canvases in. And I set up my neat little still life in front of Ben. And Ben came by and looked at the still life and my empty canvas and pointed the still life and said, "What is that for?" And I said, "That's what I'm going to paint." And he took my still life, swept it onto the floor, and pointed to the canvas and said, "That's what you're going to paint." And I thought the man had lost what little mind he was born with, you know. But I said, "Well, what do I do?" He said, "It's not my painting, it's yours. What do you want to do?" So I just took a paintbrush and slashed some blue paint on the thing, looked at him, kind of smart alecky, and said, "What next?" And he said, "You tell me." I said, "There's nothing to say except that it's too bright." He said, "Well, you can't take it down. What are you going to do next?" I said, "The only thing to do is put something brighter next to it to make it look brown." He said, "You've got it." And he just left. And that was the beginning of Alice's Wonderland being opened up to me. Everything I do is almost like call and response. I don't know the second step until the first thing has occurred. And that's the way stuff grows. It doesn't come from me, but through me. It tells me what to do. And you cannot tell me to this day that that's not the working of spirit. It's not anything visual. It's not anything mental. It's not a deduction. It's just count and counterpoint. It's a mark and a mark change it. You can't get rid of it. It's there. Put something stronger next to it, and then that will weaken it. So that's what I don't know what I'm going to do until the first thing is done. The second thing is response to the first. That's what I call spirit operating through you. It's just using my hands. It came from somewhere. I didn't invent it. I don't know what to do. It tells me what to do. Even in the carving, I cut a piece of wood shape. it looks strange. I can't uncut it. So put something next to it that counteracts that, that hides it, it promotes it. Constantly count and point it, count, point. That's spirit. And all of my work now operates that way. I don't know any other way to produce things. That's as close as I can come to explaining spirit, but it's in everything. I think it's coming through me. I don't think it's coming from me.
Beautiful.
I'll give you a chance now, Cynthia.
Cynthia.
Okay. I probably will not answer your question directly, Kimberly, because I think that the way that I see the films that I produce and what I want people to get from them, or, you know, just appreciate, I would say that for this film, as well as many others that I have produced, I think that beauty is a theme. So the beauty of the art that they created. When I produced a film on community gardens, it's the beauty of the gardens. When I created one about labyrinths, each labyrinth is practically a work of art, and it's a beautiful structure. When I created the documentary about the carousel is a work of art, and it's beautiful. And so I think that's one of the elements. The other one is, the other thing would be connections. So one of the responses that I've gotten from this film, which is wonderful and very gratifying, are all the connections that people have to all the different aspects of the film. I remember going to Oak Bluffs. I grew up in LaDroit Park. I remember minor normal school. I went to Dunbar. You know, they can relate and appreciate all that history. They lived through it, and they have that connection to these places and also to the people in the film.
That's your art. That's your art.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I guess that the other theme that I try to have in my documentaries, or that I want people to leave with, are just awareness. You know, learning about the history, learning about a segregated Washington, D.C., a segregated society, learning about what opportunities were closed to African Americans. It's important to know the history of this country. And so I want to raise awareness, and I want it to be an educational tool that people can use, that kids in schools can learn, that teachers can use it as a part of their curriculum, that museums can show, that art galleries can show. Get that information out there and make people aware. And so, and just another theme is community, you know, and family. Those are very strong themes in the film, I believe, and to see how the family support, the family bonds, and the communities that were formed, you know, with African American writers and artists and the teachers. So and in the neighborhood of LaDroit Park, as an example. So that's a lot, but those are the types of things that I really would like people to leave with after they watch this film and others I've produced.
Beautiful. Thank you both for answering that question. I think what it revealed is the parallels that you both carry with, you know, showing beauty and communication and awareness. The aspect of community and family is very strong in Lilian's story, and also what you want to reveal as well. And thank you so much. This conversation has been wonderful. We are going to answer some questions and share some commentary from our wonderful audience. But before we do that, I just want to ask both of you if there's something else that you'd like to share before we move into that portion of the program. Anything lingering?
I just want everybody to seek to be a pilgrim on their own path. That'll make me so happy. I just hope that something in this film, and the film is much more important than anything that we're talking about today. I mean, it's giving, voice to our thoughts. If something in you is found that wasn't there before, that's all that any of us really want or should want out of each other to make us a better world. And I probably go off on a tangent, but I probably
no. That's great, and thank you for that, because Cintia, I would like for you to share with us the future of the film and how our guests can view the film in the future, especially those who have not had the opportunity to see this beautiful piece of art.
Thanks, Kimberly. I would recommend to everybody that's interested, who is interested, to go to the film's website, which is kindredspiritsfilm.com. And there, I have a mailing list, and I'm regularly send out news and updates about the film. So I'm going to have it available on DVD. I'm also going to have it available for streaming. WHUT, the local PBS station, will be airing it again. There aren't any broadcast dates scheduled right now, but they will. And it also will be distributed to PBS member stations around the country. We're trying to work to air it, have member stations air it Black History Month in February of 2021 and Women's History Month in March of 2021. And so if you get on the mailing list, then you'll know, for example, when it's airing in your city, because I know several people are not in the DC area, and also when we have additional air dates. And also we're probably going to be having more of these types of virtual situations for a while. I love in-person screenings, but since that's not possible right now, we probably will have other forums like this one with other institutions. So I'm happy to keep all of you posted on those events.
Thank you, Cintia. Crystal, I'm going to cue you up. My team here has been working hard to gather all questions and comments to present to our honored guests. And Crystal, if you could share a couple of questions. We're going to spend about 10 minutes doing that.
Sure. Okay. So there are actually, Miss Lilian, you just mentioned the late Mr. Driscoll, and someone had a question about him. It said, David Driscoll, one of the featured interview subjects in the documentary, who unfortunately passed away this year. They want to know, can you talk about his importance to Lilian's life, to your life, and your work, the film for you, Cintia, and African-American art in general? So it's a tiered question. So the importance of his work.
I could say it in a few words. He became the voice for every buried body that there ever was. And he was persistent and gracious and kind about the most important educator I think that our century has had in terms of bringing the unknown to life. And he was everybody's advocate. And he saw the sunshine in every cloudy sky. He was a genius, and humbly so. He was always humble, and he was always there for us all.
And I feel privileged. I feel very sad that he passed away in April. I feel privileged to have had the opportunity to interview him for the film. He is such an important person in terms of his knowledge of African-American art. He was a longtime teacher also. And I went to the David Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland to do a lot of research there. He had kept all these archival photos of the Barnett Aiden Gallery, which I was able to incorporate in the documentary. After he passed away, I posted several clips that didn't make it into the film about when he talked about his life growing up, going to Howard University without submitting an application first, Living in a segregated DC, the 3 establishments in DC where he said, quote, "You could have a decent meal without the police being called out." So I did post those, and several of those are also in the DVD that I'll have available, because I'll have these extra clips which didn't make it in the film. So so I feel very privileged to have him in the film. What he has to say is very important, and he had first-hand knowledge of it because he was there.
Thank you for that. We have one more, well, one more question, just a second. Wait for Ms. Lilian. I think this one was specific to her, so.
Any other comments to share while we're waiting for Ms. Lilian?
There was a nice one, Miss Pamela Lawton, like you mentioned earlier. She said that she can attest to Miss Lilian. She's never forgotten Miss Lilian. She was her first art teacher, and she hadn't seen her in 40 years. And before they had reconnected, and now, you know, having her as a teacher made her want to be an artist and a teacher. So while it was going, what I see is it went from Miss Hilda to Miss Lilian, and now even to Pamela in her own specific story. You know, as the spirit that you spoke about, Miss Lilian, the spirit is just flowing, and it's going from one to the next, and it prompted. So Miss Pamela Lawton, who is here with us, she was just sharing how she's one of your previous students and how important you were to her and her work. Let me see. I have another question here. Okay, Miss Lilian, can you talk about the impact of the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s on your and Hilda's life and work? We may have touched on this already, but if there's anything else you wanted to add with that.
Well, it kind of fits in with the whole program that they had at the Museum of American Art. What's the Washington Art Museum called? It was part of the Smithsonian. It was
Smithsonian American Art Museum, SAM.
They invited 7 of us to speak on the impact that African Americans had in the previous century in the art world. And the main thing I brought out was the fact that we were closed off so many doors that we were forced underground. So we had come up with more originality than any other group had, because it didn't matter whether you liked it or it fit or whether it was acceptable. The real stuff came out of us. We'd gone deeper into ourselves than we would have possibly done if our lives had depended on it, if we looked at art as a career. And then the second thing that happened was even more important. It was like another exhibit that I curated called "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings." Because we were closed off, we came up with more originality, and only that, but we became closer together as human beings. People I barely knew could get angry with me because I didn't call on them when they found out I had a need of something. People I didn't even know. Because we were closed off, we became closer together. So it's what I call finding a way out of no way, of singing, because we're closed up in a cage and there's nothing else to do. So everything in life that presents a disadvantage can be used for an advantage, but we need each other to do that. So if there was we were in better shape during the segregated school time than any other time, because every daggone teacher we taught, they were teaching themselves when they taught us. We better get it, because we represented the race. And so the interest was very personal. It was very different than education is in these days. So that's just the way stuff works. That's life. The empty space has to be filled, or else we all drown. And we brought us closer together. So there was an advantage to disadvantage. And we've kept the spirit. We've kept the spirit even though things are changing. Does that answer your question? Kind of. I probably went off on a tangent.
Crystal, are there any more? You're muted. Are there any more questions?
I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm looking through. There were a lot of agreements with a lot of things that's been said. So,
Awesome.
but yeah, I think those were the two main questions. If there's any other questions that anyone may have, you can type it in right now. I'll make sure we ask it. But right now, those were the two main questions that I saw so far.
Awesome. Well, I think we've actually hit our time, and thank you, Lilian and Cynthia. I'm going to applaud, and those watching, so we can see you applaud as well. This has been a true pleasure and an honor, and I have lots of questions, but it's not my show, it's for everybody else. And I know that we can talk forever. Cynthia spent a lot of time in the archives, so I got to know her, and recently met Lilian virtually. And again, these connections are just there, including Lilian's previous work with Sumner School Museum and Archives, and also Hilda was a student at Sumner School as well. So again, there's so much history, so much richness, and I just want to applaud Cynthia for scratching the stone and illuminating so much. And I know that the film will inspire future research, which is what our Hurlbut-Walker Forum is all about as well. So I want to thank you both for your time and for sharing and for being here. And thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you also, Kimberly, and the summer school staff for hosting this event, and also for all your help in finding those really important images which I used in the film, including finding that Dunbar High School yearbook. Lilian's yearbook photo was. That was a real find.
Yes. So thank you. And that's what the museum is all about, what the archives is all about, is providing that assistance to illuminate these stories. That's what the forum is about. So thank you. It's all connected. It is our honor, privilege, is indeed a privilege to assist in these sorts of projects. But thank you both. I also want to thank Hilda in spirit for her gifts, and all others who pushed and continue to push to make a way for us to fulfill our potential and our destiny. Lastly, well, not lastly, I have some other people to thank, I'm sorry. I want to thank Russ Williams for assisting with technology and photography work that he's done for Lilian with in and I think even with some of the interviews. Also David Robinson, who came in and assisted Lilian with getting set up today. Of course, I must thank my team, Crystal Hurd and Zoe Joyner, for all of the work with getting this program together. Zoe actually provided many of the questions that I asked this evening, and she pulled together the slide presentation that we'll close out with. And Crystal created graphics, and just every little last minute thing that we needed. She's always there to make sure that things run smoothly, and their assistance with the logistics of the program as well. And now at the last, and certainly not least, I want to thank all of you all for tuning in. Our programs would not be possible without the support of each and every one of you.
Can I throw something else here in the middle of the sentence quickly? Because
Yes.
Wesley just put up a note. I have to brag about him. Richard and I are first cousins, but he's the only other kooky one in the family because he's an artist, but he's a very famous writer, filmmaker and writer. Is it filmmaker, Richard? But he just gave us all a compliment, and that is a compliment, believe you me. This is a guy that plays on Broadway.
Oh, awesome.
Richard Wesley. Hey, Rich.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I want to invite you all to stay connected with us via our social media platforms. We are also newly launched within this quarantine period, a YouTube channel. And this recording actually will be on the YouTube channel. And so please tell your friends who missed this wonderful event live that they can catch the recording on our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook if you're there, on Twitter, and on Instagram. The information is on the graphic. Lastly, we depend on all of you all to help make our programs great and our content great. And we're always trying to improve and make things better. So we have compiled a short survey that we'll email to all participants. So in your time next week. If you get a few moments, we greatly appreciate you taking a few moments to provide us some feedback about tonight's program. And finally, I just want to thank you all again for being here. Thank you, Cintia. Thank you, Lilian. And we look forward to engaging with you again really soon at a future event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks to the audience for putting up with us.
Oh, and audience, if you want to stick around for a little while longer, some of you may have missed at the beginning, but Zoe Joyner, our intern, who's a student at Spelman College, she spent time pulling together images of Hilda and Lilian's work. And we have a little slideshow that we will keep this platform up for another 5 minutes or so. So if we can get the slideshow going one last time, and we'll close on the beautiful works of Hilda Brown and Liian Thomas Burwell. And thank you all. Bear with us for just a second. We're getting it up.
Yes, it's trying to get it up. I apologize.
Loading what?
Awesome.
What's it gonna do? They recorded the whole thing. Isn't it? Wow. You know, my mother was in there.